sorry, Amandala Drive in sweet Southside Belize City. Will be with us for the next hour and a half. Our guest this morning is no stranger to the space, Brother George Myvette, a marine biologist and technical advisor voluntarily for the Belize Federation of Fishers, an umbrella organization that represents hundreds of fisher folks and a number of communities. Good morning, Brother Akko. Good morning, Brother George.
Good morning, Sister YaYa. Good to see you and good to see you, Brother George. My name is Mutota, and I'm from Trinidad and Tobago.
How the morning the teacher, Brother Akko?
What is it, please?
How the morning the teacher?
Good, good. I was on one interview on Ari FM in Jamaica. So this is my second for the morning. And then later on this evening, we'll be on Zoom.
Give thanks. Brother George, how the morning?
The morning is great. It's kind of blustery and sunny and bright, of course. It's good to be back, YaYa. Pleasant good morning to you and Brother Akko, as well as Belize and the world beyond. You know, everything is now, it's not only local, it's global. I believe the last time I was on this platform would have been maybe a couple of years ago. So it's good to be back.
You know that long, George. I show you me there last year. You come on at least once a year for damn sure. In 2025, thanks to Brother Akko, the focus for Sunday Review is on the Caribbean. We are being intentional. We're often not getting news out of the Caribbean. Credible people, not talk face to face, not analyze what happened behind corporate media headlines a lot of time, and have conversations that matter to people who might not even make the headlines. So in that vein, I just want to give you some shush. I know shush kind of real news, but Brother Akko give me some news this morning out of Trinidad and Tobago. Tell me about the the Trinidad and Tobago, Brother Akko.
Well, it's not laughable, but sometimes it is so ridiculous what happens in Trinidad that sometimes you have to laugh, otherwise it will make you crazy. So a couple of days ago, the Commissioner of Police, right, Ulla Harewood Christopher, first female Commissioner of Police, she was arrested for apparently authorizing a firearm that was illegal to have in Trinidad. And so she gave authorization, apparently, and I don't have all the facts, but what I've been reading in the media is that she authorized the acquisition of a firearm that she was not supposed to authorize. And so the state has since placed her under arrest, and she's been investigated. I understand that either today or tomorrow she should get bail. But this has wider political implications because apparently there is a link to the Strategic Services Agency, which is the equivalent of our Secret Service. And the head of that was fired not too long ago either. And apparently this situation with the police commissioner is connected. The particular person that is directly related to the acquisition of the firearm is a particular businessman, a Syrian businessman, and the Syrian Lebanese community are some of the biggest. They are 1% of the population, but have significant reach into the national economy. And I also understand that there are also some connections to a couple of the ministers in the government who may have also acquired these firearms that, in a manner they shouldn't have. So that's where we are. It's an unfolding situation, and we will be getting more news about that in the days ahead. But as it is now, according to newspaper reports, the Commissioner of Police has been arrested and is being investigated right now, and we have an acting commissioner in charge of the police service in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thanks for that update on news out of Trinidad and Tobago, Brother Akko. I have to be more intentional as we move forward with Sunday Review. Brother Akko got news from the Caribbean. This is a news review talk show. And since 2012, we've been focusing primarily on Belize, but now we're being intentional and focusing on the Caribbean. So we're still to come back home Belize Federation of Fishers and Ubat Educational Foundation collaborating for 1 year of Belize Bluebond Awareness Campaign 2025. So today's conversation, that part of the process. Brother George, what does the Belize Bluebond have to do with the Belize Federation of Fishers?
Just let me digress a little, if you will. As I listen to Brother Arco talk about the police commissioner, you know, in science, we say that in theory, there should be no difference between theory and practice. But in practice, there is. I don't know that we have the structures in place. Perhaps in theory we do in Belize, but I don't know that in practical terms we could actually arrest and charge a commissioner. It doesn't happen that way. I think there's some structural issues there that would make for an interesting comparison between Trini. And I say kudos to Trini for a system that allows the commissioner to no doubt be investigated and arrested. That's a step up in terms of democracy for us. We long for such a day in Belize. But yes.
Wait, stick up in, George. You got no more road, do it, George. Remember they're a republic.
Let me respond to Brother George on that, because you know there is a de facto and de jure. Now, what we have in Trinidad is the appearance of something. So what people refer to these approaches as catch and release. So we have had a number of prominent Trinidadian businessmen who have been charged. Okay, like there was one instance in which there was a scandal around the paving of the airport runway. And there was an American contractor that was involved. When the investigation was done, right, by a forensic pathologist, they found the American contractor was guilty of receiving bribes. And they found the Trinidadian businessmen and government officials were responsible for giving the bribes. Okay? The American government brought the American business people to trial. They were tried, convicted, and sent to prison. The Trinidadian businessmen have not yet been sent to prison. This is over 20 years. Okay? To the point that one of them, he died before he could be sentenced. The other one is fighting cases, all kinds of constitutional amendment, and is still out there. And the former prime minister who was implicated in the scandal, he died too, without any. So while on paper, theoretically, right, or de jure, it may look as if we have this kind of democratic procedure where we can catch the big fish. In reality, when they are caught, they are released. So the term people use is catch and release. Not a single person of prominence in the country who has been charged with a crime, political or otherwise. In fact, one of the ministers, right, Francis Myvette, he was caught red-handed. And when he was about to be charged, he went to Panama and subsequently ended up living and dying in Costa Rica. Likewise, another minister called O'Halloran. So it is a pretense. It is a term we use in Trinidad. We call it gambage, right? Or you know, is a term we use where you pretend something is one way and in reality it is not, right? Or another term we use called simidimi. Simidimi may be the more appropriate word. What simidimi is, you perform a set of rituals to make people believe you're doing something, but in reality you are doing nothing. So all the big fish who are, they're charged, not a single one has ever been convicted and put in prison. So it is a pretense and a mockery of the so-called justice system and also of democracy. So I just wanted to clarify that. So it is not for Belize to believe that they are less than Trinidad, because even though we pretend to do something, in fact we are doing nothing. What Trinidad call is just timidimi. You make a set of action if you're doing something and nothing happens.
Brother Akko, I'm really glad you make that point, because a number of Belizeans seem to think that if we move from the Westminster system and go to being one republic, that there will be more justice. And I really pleased. I'm sure there are pros and cons to both systems, but I'm really pleased that you make that distinction that things not always what they appear to be. I really have to take bad thing, make laugh sometimes. You see how we gone, George, but I like when we have organic conversations like this. And it's interesting that they call it catch and release, because you bring it right back to how we want to go. Marine
Exactly.
science.
But catch and release. But even though you talk about the republic, it's the same thing. That's why I say we say simidimi. We appear to be a republic in name, right, based on paper, but in functionality, right, and demonstration. And we are not a republic. We are a Westminster parliamentary model with a president who has no power and a prime minister who has all the power. So even though we are a republic, the opposition has no power, the attorney general has no power, and so on and so forth. And these are things we have to examine, but today is not the day to examine that. We are here to focus on Brother George, but Brother George started this off. So we are back again to a justice system that catches the big fish, but releases them when the time comes to do something about it. So back to Brother George.
Excellent. Well, again, let me underline the idiom, the catch and release idiom there. With us here in Belize, obviously, we are not even at the point of catching. So you guys are still a step ahead of us for sure. But let me get to the question of Sister YaYa in terms of what does fishers have to do about blue bun? What is it? How are they related to blue bun? Well, really, blue buns in principle, and I'll remind you that there's a salient element, there's an important element of a depth for nature swap. Depth for nature swap. And I say an important element because there's a market component of it that is not in principle the depth for nature. The depth for nature swap started as a conversation in the UN, and it took hold, and it was an arrangement, it was envisioned as an arrangement between nations where a nation can put up in principle and in practice a part of its real estate that has forests and that has sea, etc. involved, and there would be debt forgiveness. The Belize Blue Bond is not a debt forgiveness. It's a marketing tool that has certain beneficiaries. All right, so first of all, I want to say that in relation to the nature part of it, it could be divided. The real estate of Belize, I guess, like many other nations, not all, but the majority of nations that we know of, could be divided into a land domain and a sea domain. In Belize, if you ask the average Belizean, what is the size of Belize? I believe that everybody above kindergarten will tell you that the size of Belize is 8,867 square miles. What they will not tell you is that excludes the sea domain. And the sea domain of Belize is actually 13,966 square miles. When you add up the sea domain and the land domain, the total size of Belize is 22,833 square miles, i.e., there's a ratio of 2 to 3 in Belize. 40% of the territory of Belize is land, 60% is sea. When you talk about sea,
Brother George,
yes.
Please give the numbers again. This may be, I've heard this conversation on WB with Sandra Cowie, Sister Sandra Cowie and Most High. But this, they're not something, no, this is what you call decolonization right now. Run the numbers again, just like how you say it, Brother George.
All right, let me go slowly. The territory of Belize comprises both sea space and land space. And I think even the land space did not get it right. Why am I saying this? The 8867, I strongly believe, is only related to mainland Belize, what we refer to as continental Belize. But Belize, somebody had the time on their hand, and they have found out that we have 1,304 keys. You hear me? 1,304 keys. The capital of Belize, and this is for my brother, especially my brother Brother Akko, the capital of Belize was on one of those keys. It was on St. George's Key in the early founding of this nation. We have one of our keys, San Pedro Ambergris Key, is about the size of Barbados. All right, so we have, so even the 8867 is not necessarily accurate, but we'll round it off and say that it's 8867 square miles of land territory, and there is 13,966 square miles of sea territory, 1396 square miles, for a total of 22,833 square miles. 60% of the territory of Belize is sea. So, in relation to nature, the sea is extremely important. And it's extremely important because Belize is not an industrialized nation. Belize is a natural resource-based nation. It's a natural resource-based economy. And so when you look at that, the two, well, certainly in terms of the entire nation, the two biggest contributors to GDP is tourism and agriculture. A significant amount of tourism happens in the sea space, the coast and sea. Essentially, 99.9% of the fishes that you will catch and eat in Belize, and that is exported, comes from the marine space. So directly to the issue that you raised, sis, what is it that fishers have to do? Fishers are really a very, very important stakeholders. Those are the guys that basically harvest commercially. The commercial fishers, they harvest fish for the dinner table. An official speak for that is food security. Our fishers also contribute significantly to foreign exchange. Belize has a small population relative to its size. We only have 400,000 people, and so most of the high-value seafood, the majority of it, lobster and conch, is exported and brings in a tremendous amount of foreign exchange. Let me also say again to your issue, Sister YaYa, that when you look at the entire Caribbean, the CARICOM Caribbean, the Insular Caribbean, Belize, the contribution from fisheries is roughly about a little over 2% to GDP. In much of the Caribbean, the contribution of fisheries to GDP is less than 1%. So it is very, very important to understand that our fishers are stakeholders that are important to the economy. Livelihood, jobs, it creates a lot of jobs. We have roughly about 4,000 fishers. And when you look at the dependence on fishers, you scale that up by 5, at least by 5. So you're looking at roughly about 20,000 people in Belize that derive benefit from the commercial end of the fishing industry. And I say the commercial end because there's also a sport fishing end that does contribute significantly to GDP. The Blue Band has an input side and an output side. The input side relates to the parties, those persons, those institutions that brought the band together. These are the GOB political leadership, the government of Belize political leadership. It is the Nature Conservancy, TNC, and it is, of course, the bondholders who are not resident in Belize. The bondholders, the banks, they are not resident in Belize. Who has not been on the input end, who has not been contacted, included in any conversation relating to their interests and their livelihood has been fishers. Actually, in my view, Belize has almost defaulted on its foreign debt obligations 4 times. The Blue Bond is really a loan agreement that succeeded the Super Bond. My brother Nigel Martinez has gone into that on public media. What the Blue Bond is and what it has done, it has been, in my view, the government in 2021, a new administration came into government at the end of 2020, and they met a humongous debt. I believe that the outgoing prime minister at the time spoke about a poison chalice that was handed to the incoming administration. And my belief is that they were, to use a kind of lingo of the streets, they were over a barrel, they were desperate. And so I can't forgive them, but they did not either have time, and I believe they did not see it fit to actually consult with stakeholders, including Fishers. So what Fishers got at the output end is everybody else benefited. The bondholders benefited, the government of Belize benefited because there was some debt relief. The TNC benefited because there's been a conservation fund that has been a part of the arrangement. And that conservation fund, you know who it excludes? There has been no mention of Fishers. That conservation fund has benefited tremendously the non-government conservation NGOs in this country. It has benefited TIDE, the Toledo Institute of Development and Environment. It has benefited C, which is, I can't remember what that acronym stands for. Long story short, the primary beneficiaries in country has been the conservation-related NGOs. If you look at the milestone.
One more, Brother George. Who has also benefited has been the attorneys in Belize. So you have Belizean attorneys who have benefited. Who have not benefited along with the Fishers are the majority of Belizean people who will have to pay this debt back because we never know nothing for at least 17 to 18 months. This was done in secrecy. So we not benefit because we don't know what they agreed to. How we are said, we don't even know what they agreed to for we pay back. There are lots of things that are unknown. So we have to be upfront and say from the conception, the people were not a priority. And the people will include Fisher folks and communities.
Well, you're absolutely right, Sister YaYa. And I'm treading on the territory of Brother Accra, and I'm hoping that he joins here. At the point that the Blue Bond arrangement was made formal in 2021, the debt to GDP ratio was 103% to 100. It was essentially 1.0. It was a ratio of 1.02 to 1. Long story short, the debt was greater than all the goods and services added up in this country. My fear, Sister YaYa, is that when the debt relief that accrued from the Blue Bond was brought to bear, I believe that the figure that has been touted is that it reduced the debt of the nation by 12%, which should have been significant. What has happened since then is that the GOB has been busy borrowing money. And so whatever savings there were, that has been already eclipsed in our view, but you will not get an accurate picture. And I am saying this because none other than the governor of the central bank was on public television a couple months ago, and he said that essentially the public debt was 64% of GDP. I do not believe him. I do not believe him because nobody has seen the figures that inform that. Long story short, My understanding from a recent conversation is that since the new administration has come into government, they have borrowed close to $3 billion.
That's Belize
These are
dollars.
Belize dollars. Long
We
story
have to go
short,
to a break in a 5 minutes. So before we go, I want Brother Akko give it 2 cents from what we hear so far, especially within a global racist capitalist system.
Sister YaYa, Brother George said so many things that it would take a whole hour to really respond. I was listening and taking notes as he was speaking, right? And one of the last points he made, which maybe I should start there, is the question of the statistics in which these governments will produce statistics to show how we benefit from particular economic and economic action. And there is a term that is used, which I think is appropriate. It says there are lies, damned lies, and statistics, right? And I repeat, it means there are lies, damned lies, and statistics. So what happens is that statistics are provided to show improvement, but in reality, statistics is not a reflection of the reality of people's lives. Okay, right? And so this is what they do. It's they bamboozle people with all these GDP and GNP and so on. And how do people feel is what matters. Do people really feel that their lives are impacted positively by those statistics? And the answer is no. The other thing that I listened to and I heard from Brother George is about this issue of the investment, who benefits. You know, there is a terminology that is being used now called casino capitalism, right? And it says that the house always wins. No matter as a gambler, you feel you win, the house always wins, right? And this is how the modern capitalist economic system operates, right? It sells certain ideas to you about what benefits you will get, and the blue bond is one of those, right? So it sells this to the people of Belize, and the politicians are the salesmen because that's what they are. Their interest is not to serve the people. They are here to sell the interest and to sell the ideas that emerge in these foreign financial institutions, World Bank, IMF, whatever, Credit Suisse, which I think is the one who facilitated the Blue Bond, which is a Swiss company. And they sell you these ideas about the benefits to the people. And at the end of it, the people do not benefit. I think there is a term Michael Mann used to use called the up the down escalator, right? In which you think you are going somewhere, but in reality, you are not going anywhere. All of these models, these financial instruments, are a product of modern capitalism and the extractivist economy. So they extract everywhere. They're extracting oil on land, they're extracting gold in Africa. And what we have in the Caribbean are these islands and this coastline. And so the sea has now become part of the battleground for this extractivist economy, right? This is why Trump wants Greenland, because they want to extract from Greenland. Because in their own countries, they have ravaged their country so much and ravaged other economies so much that they are now looking for other places. And unfortunately, because we have weak governments in the Caribbean, weak and traitorous leaders in the Caribbean, right? Weak institutions, because our institutional framework is still tied to the old metropolitan colonial models. Okay, even when we change and say republic, whatever, it is still tied to those models. And those models were never meant to serve the people. They're always meant to serve those who are the progenitors or the creators of these systems. And so what you are seeing in Belize here is a classic case with this blue bond of an extractivist model of economics that was never intended to be beneficial to the people of Belize and to the people of the wider Caribbean. The problem with that is that these resources are not infinite, right? These resources are finite. So if we don't have models and systems where we can accrue benefits from these people, 10, 15 years from now, we can be in very, very, very serious problem. The question is, and I think the simple question is, or the simple answer, if you want to call it that, is that there must be an understanding of the international capitalist model, right? Historically, it is what brought us to these parts of the world. The capitalist model. We were the commodities. They were selling slaves in order to build their economic model. We fought, slavery was abolished. Then they created a system in which now we became wage slaves, but they still extracted from our societies. Then we fought and we got so-called flag independence. So now they create neo-colonial models with a trained leadership, either trained in France or in England. And these leaders who were trained and schooled in the system of our colonizers, they perpetuated the same models, right, in a different way in the contemporary um, situation. And this is what we are dealing with. So whether it's blue bond, whether it is stock market, it is the same model that intend to extract as much as possible from us to transfer to those outside. And the last point, I know we're going to a break just now. A very interesting point that the judge also made about the NGOs. The NGOs are Trojan horses in our societies. Most of them are there to serve the interests of the status quo. The NGO is an industry created by the capitalist system in order, in other words, they realized we were able to see the contradiction of the missionaries. A priest can't come and tell a pray, son, to me, and you'll go to heaven. And yeah. So what they do is they take the issues that we are concerned about and they create these NGOs as do-gooders, okay, to supposedly assist us when in fact these NGOs are Trojan horses undermining our sovereignty and undermining our path to liberation. The quicker we understand that, it will be better for all of us.
Thanks, Brother Akon, Brother George. It's break time. I'm being a short ad break. And stay tuned. We'll come back to have the reasoning with our marine biologist, Belizean guest, George Myvette, and our co-hosts from the islands of Trinidad and Tobago, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Brother Akon Mutota. Break time.
February. ranking junior. Just send for Bernie Mac and Kenny M. Me brother. Send for and the beat, send for the mad rapper. Just set to stone jam, you are the come. This have it with A, with a fear. Nobody do it, you know what him all.
Back to the second segment of Sunday Review for this morning, Sunday, February 2nd, 2025. Sister YaYa, Brother Akko, and Brother George. I know during the break I have to stop there. Like, we can't have the show before the show. Make wait till we come up for the second segment. So, Brother George, I'm loving the conversation. Brother George, tell me what I want to talk about in the second segment as it relates to fishers, fisher folks, fishing communities, as it relates to the Belize Blue Bond.
Well, but Accra is almost an infinite source of information related to the Blue Bond and things otherwise. Two of the issues that I would start with is one, he talked about the finite extent of things, and that includes both geographic space as well as resources. But Accra also talked about the NGO conservation community being Trojan horses, and I couldn't agree with him more. To the first point, in terms of the finite extent of resources, a part of the Blue Bond arrangement between the government of Belize, TNC, and the bondholders is that the government of Belize obligated itself to declaring additional ocean space as MPAs, as marine protected areas. We started up at the point that this Blue Bond arrangement was struck. We had a little over, I believe, 15% of the Belizean seas as marine protected areas. Belize has obligated itself to declaring 30%, as much as 30% of its marine space as marine protected areas. Of that 30%, 12% needs to be no-take. You know what no-take mean? In the lingua creole, do you know what no-take mean in the Queen's English, or no, it's the King's English?
It means you can't go fish there?
Fishers cannot go there to fish. To compound this problem, it's not only a shrinkage in space, but we have what is referred to as an open access fishery. And it means that anybody who is a Belizean, and to add insult to injury over the last couple of years, anybody who is a Belizean or a resident alien could happen on the steps of the fisheries department for a fishing license. And there's nothing in law to restrict the amount of fishers in the fishing industry. So what you have is a pressure cooker situation where the space, the geographic space is shrinking, but there are more fishers coming into the industry. You know what that spells? It spells stock depletion. It spells overfishing. It spells economic doom. It spells a decrease in employment. And at the end of the day, the great tragedy here is that the Blue Bond is driven by what is referred to as conservation, the conservation ethos. But the conservation ethos for most people mean the environment. It means mangrove. It means saving the coral reef. It means saving the mangroves. But you know who is not in the equation for most people when it comes to saving things, conservation?
People.
The species Homo sapien, sapien, Pisces. Fishermen are not into the endangered species list, but they are. And the great tragedy is that one of the greatest enemies of conservation, one of the greatest enemies of sustainable development, you know, is what? Poverty. We did a study in CARICOM in 2012. And in that study, there were about 7 nations that was a part of that research. You know who the second to the poorest nation was? Belize. It was a multi-dimensional study. Belize was the fishers in Belize were the second to the poorest demographic in CARICOM. You know, Guyana has since found oil, and it has affected everybody significantly. So the fishers in Guyana are no more poor. So you know whose fishers is the poorest in the Caribbean, in CARICOM? Belizean fishers.
But
And
George, George, I don't know how true that is because it make her go back to her brother Akosa earlier. You know how that Belize then I come out and put out statistics and say the employment rate is so and so, but the people up on the ground want to work, want to apply for job and can't get, know that what is statistics to say, and for them reality are two different things. So I don't know if really Guyanese fishers are no longer impoverished. I don't believe that.
No, well, unless I see different. But well, let us say, for the sake of this conversation, the needle, the poverty needle has not departed from where it was in Guyana, just for the sake of this conversation. Then we will say that the status quo from 2012 migrating to 2025 has not moved for Guyana fishers, which is very unlikely. But long story short, it means that the Belizean fisher would still be the second poorest fishers in CARICOM. Not good. When you look at the forcing functions, there are functions that has our Belizean fishers on a trajectory where they will not only be poor, they will be out of a job. And maybe I should qualify what will is. Because a number of fishers are no more fishing because they are besetted by inflation and because they are besetted by depletion, stock depletion. I hear Brother Akko said that, in the next 12 years, I believe he said maybe the next 10 to 12 years, the whole depletion narrative will come to haunt us. Well, let me say to Brother Akko and the world that it is here, and it is here in a big way, but nobody is keeping track of the amount of fishers who are being displaced from the Belize fishing industry. They cannot make a living anymore. How do I know this? These fishers call the Belize Federation of Fishers on a frequent basis, asking us for assistance. Unfortunately, the Belize Federation of Fishers is not in a position to directly input assistance to them, which is why we are saying that there has to be a reset in terms of the conservation. Remember I talk about the conservation fund? That conservation fund needs to be restructured so that fishers can have direct benefits. You know what the conservation fund is doing when they mention fishers? They have workshops, they have enforcement, and they have nothing else for fishers. So there's no direct benefits coming to fishers. If anybody was sensible enough at the political level and otherwise to do a needs analysis for fishers, you know what they would find? They would find that the most critical need for fishers is grant assistance. The NGO community and the conservation community are doing extremely well. You know how well they're doing, Sister YaYa? Thus far, $22,000 has been dispersed from the conservation fund. You know how much of that fishers have gotten? Zero.
Brother
No
George,
surprise to me.
the conservation fund were guests on WB on Friday. And they say in their third year, they have a community grant. Now, how to explain the community grant? I still not feel that in the interest of fishers. You hear the conversation?
I did not hear that conversation, sis.
What I say
But
is they have a community grant. And with the community grant, small organizations or groups or associations who don't have the infrastructure, who don't have one NGO status or a non-profit status, then that conservation fund will manage the funding. The people then could submit their proposal. There's no guarantee it'll be accepted. And then they are vetted. And then the best one will have the financial support based on the conservation fund personnel. So if you want, I think they mentioned maybe the Chinooks fishers, I think, for example, maybe we want to expand the shed where they meet. And this is what I just tell you what I say Friday. I don't agree with it, but that's what I say.
But sis, I want to get back to that. My understanding, I spoke to the executive director of the BFF where I volunteer. And he said that one of the promises made to the Chinook fishermen is that their headquarters, their HQ will be expanded. But that is not the most critical need, Sister YaYa. The most critical need is there's a need to diversify livelihood. I don't want to say diversify the fishing industry, diversify livelihood. And so what fishers really need, they need financial grants to go deep sea fishing. They need financial grants in the form of boats and equipment to go deep sea fishing. They need financial grants to harvest underutilized resources within traditional seas, such as stone crabs and oysters. They need financial grants to begin farming fish. They need financial grants to begin farming sea cucumber. They need financial grants to begin setting up businesses. That is not what has happened thus far. And I will be surprised if it ever happens, because there seems to be an understanding in the conservation community that no monies will be put in the hands of these organizations and these fishers that has anything to do with direct development. It's all capacity building and a lot of rhetoric about inclusion when there's really not much inclusion. The inclusion is you come to a workshop about how to fish sustainably. The inclusion is we will teach you about hurricanes and how to prepare for hurricanes. I would be surprised if there's any funds earmarked that would directly benefit fishers to go fishing. You know, thus far, Sis and Brother Acker, thus far, the only money that has been made available, not from the Blue Band, but otherwise, is some money that was passed through the Development Finance Corporation in the form of loans. Two things are happening there. The fishers in Belize are 100% small-scale fishers. You know what that means? They generally do not have the asset base to qualify for loans. And even the ones that qualify for loans, two things are happening there. Stocks are being depleted in a very, very significant way. And the terms and conditions are astronomical. My understanding is that those monies will be made available and have been made available for as much as 14%. I could be wrong in terms of the absolute interest, but I know that it is according to Brother Nigel of the BFF, it's in excess of what the DFC normally lends, and it's in excess of the commercial banks. I want to say, Sis, before I depart and allow Brother Acker to come in here, that we did some research, and what we found is that of 20 species that were studied, and these include the high-value species, these include the backbone of the fishing industry. This include lobster and conch and all the nice fish that Belizean like to eat. Snappers, groupers, barracudas, grunts. And you know what we found? 17 of the 20 species are overharvested and depleted. And even the ones that are not terribly depleted, you know what is happening? We are not catching the adult stocks. And it means to a large extent that the fishes that are being harvested have not had a chance to reproduce. And you know what that is? That spells a downward spiral in terms of the ability of those fishes to replenish the stocks. So we are not in a good place. To the situation with the NGOs, I will depart from this in 10
Wait,
seconds.
Brother George, we ain't got time. I want Brother Akko answer in this segment. Maybe we have to get to the NGO in the next segment. Brother Akko, what their 2 cents?
The thing I'm listening to George, and it is so similar to me, the community I grew up in. I grew up in a fishing community. Okay. Now, the first thing I think we have to realize, as Caribbean people and nationals of our own particular territories, is that the model we are working with is flawed. The model is flawed. You know, there's a branch of sociology, called political economy, right? Now, sometimes we talk about the politics as a government, and then we talk about the economy, but we are not talking about political economy, right? It's a specific area of study. It has to do with how politics, with the new fancy term everybody have now, intersection. Whereas where politics, economy, and social benefits converge, political economy, right? And we are not studying that. So we have to come up with a political economic model that serves our interests. And our academics are not talking about it, and our politicians are certainly not talking about it. The other point I want to make is this. With all the talk of sustainability, there is not a single example of where a capitalist socio-political economic model has demonstrated sustainability. There's not a single example. Okay? What we have seen in the course of time, as this model evolved through history, is the extermination of species from animal to plants to humans. When the first conquistadores came to this hemisphere, there were millions of people, Aztecs, all kinds of people. Some of them are exterminated. In Trinidad, we had a people called the Autoroid, we had Caribs, we have some descendants here, we had Arawaks, Tainos, and so on. Those people are exterminated. The same model that caused the extermination of plant, human, and animal species. These are the same political and economic models we are using to solve our problems, right? They are variants of the same model, right? So the first thing we have to come to terms with is that this political, socio-economic model that we are using cannot work, will not work, whether we call it Westminster, Republican, whatever, it cannot work, right? One, that model is a competitive model. There is no civilization in human history from the days of the Neanderthal to now that has developed a proper civilization based on the competitive model. The only sustainable model is the cooperative model. That's the only one. Now, earlier Sister YaYa said that the cooperative model is compromised. Yes, they are compromising it because they realize therein lies our solution. So what they have done is to infiltrate it. That's why I said Trojan horses. They have infiltrated these cooperative models. And what they have done is twisted them in ways that they do not serve the interests of the people. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. I grew up in a fishing village. When I was a child, the fishermen had no money to buy engines. So what they had were oar boats. Okay? They had oar boats. They would have oar paddles, big paddles. And they would paddle these boats out and they would go out to sea. When they came back and they caught their fish, they'll bring all the fish in a basket. And I, as a child, would look at this and it taught me a lesson about cooperation. Okay? And the captain of the boat whoever was the captain, because sometimes the boat is owned by someone, the captain of the boat will take the fish. And he will say, one fish for the boat. Okay? One fish for the captain. And they will divide the fish among the crew. We were 4 people. When they were finished with the division of the fish for the crew, right? That was the fish they would feed their families also. So if you had 5 children, you may get a little more. The rest of those fish, they would take it and sell it to the public, who was there by the boat waiting to catch fresh fish. Because the fish should be eaten in the boat. So I grew up eating fresh fish as a child. So it was an indigenous cooperative model that worked for the community. Okay? And so for years, this is how people lived. When fishing was hard, these same people did farming. Okay, they would go and do plant the cassavas and so on. Because sometimes the sea is so rough that you can't go out and so on. But it was a cooperative model. What has happened in the last 30, 40 years is that we have been schooled and educated in a culture of individualism. And therefore, we have what is called cast away the cooperative model. Even financially, we had something in Trinidad called Susu. I'm sure they may have some version of it in Belize.
Syndicate. Syndicate.
Right, where people will pull their money together and they'll give hands. So if you wanted to buy something for Christmas and you wanted to go and get something, you get the hand at a particular. All these were cooperative models that we used that sustained us for hundreds of years before there was oil, before there was motor cars on the road, before all of these things. Right? We moved away from these models and we have now brought to the model where they're selling us blue bond, where they're selling us this, right? I'll give you an example again. We have a net fishing called seining. It's a big net where you go out and you catch fish, right? When you pull in the fish, you pull in all kinds of fish, big ones, small ones. The fishermen, the same men, will tell the young children, take the small fish and put it back in the sea. It was natural conservation. We were taught that as children. If the fish was a certain size, you just throw it back in the sea because you want, So we had all these things built into our indigenous culture. And over time, we have lost these methodologies because these were not just ideas. These were methodologies of survival. This was indigenous science, right? And unless we understand these things and modernize them, right? Because this is what we have done. We have what is called rejected our own systems and embrace a version of modernization that has set us about 25 years or 50 years backward, right? So now we are dependent on NGOs for grants. So what I was telling you, when the fishermen wanted to fix the boat, right? The boat repair, they put aside a set of fish for that, which would be sold, and that was to fix the boat. And there was no quarrel because the fishermen understood that if you didn't repair the boat, you couldn't go out to sea again. So the point is that we have to look in our indigenous heritage and find out what sustained us and take these things and modernize them and contextualize them to the present. This model here of grants and all of these bonds, and these models are not meant to serve our interest. They are meant to serve the interests of the colonizers and the neo-colonizers, right? In other words, we have a flawed model that we are trying to use to solve our problem. It has not worked and will not work. Okay, you take the sea, for example, right? The sea is part of our heritage, right? When you talk about of limiting areas where fishermen can fish, what are you doing? You are creating an apartheid of conservation. That's what you're doing, right? This is why a number of people in Europe are rejecting what they call green colonialism, right? Because what the capitalists have done is they have wrecked the environment. Their methods, their approaches have wrecked the environment. The people at the bottom level who are feeling in the grassroots, people are saying, okay, we need a new dispensation, we need a new paradigm. So they say, yeah, we can give you a new paradigm. You know what? We're going to be big on this conservation and sustainability. And what they do now is create a model that serves them that they are selling to us. And now we are buying that model without understanding that that model is leading us to our doom. So this, right, I said this one time in Trinidad, that if Trinidad was a movie, right, we'll be going straight to hell with Machel Montano, the straight Carlson, provided the soundtrack. All of these things that they are telling you here is leading us on the path to hell, right? With whoever is the top Calypsonian, whoever is the soundtrack, the NGOs provided the soundtrack, and we are going straight to hell. These are not sustainable. You are talking about saving fish, yes, we want to save fish, but what about the people? The people are never, as George said, they are never central to this thing. And what we want are people-centered development, not bond-centered development, right? Not NGO-centered development. We want people-centered development. And if you want the solutions, you will go to the people. As Molefi Asante said in one of his books, I think, Afrocentricity, the collective genius of African people have solved all our problems. If we bring the collective genius of our people to bear to this debate, we will come up with solutions. But they don't want participation. What they do, they create elites. So the NGOs are new elites in the process. They are now becoming the experts on how to solve poverty, right? They're, to respond to what George said, and you challenge him on the statistical disparity possible between Guyana and Belize. Well, there is something called poverty and there's something called destitution, right? They are the same poverty, but one is at the far extreme end. And to a large extent, what is happening with all of these plans and programs that we are having throughout the Caribbean is leading us to destitution. I will digress from this particular debate and go to what is happening in Chile. We had
wait, Brother George. I mean, Brother Akko, 5 minutes overdue for break. So we can take one quick break. Stick that thought, Brother George, before we go, have to talk about the Trojan Horse NGOs, the Fishing Association, and the Race Cooperative. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Tired of replacing light bulbs? LEDs
excited. All right, I can calm myself down. Sister Yaya, Brother Akka, Brother George, I want speed wrong. It's 11:42. Brother Akka, do you remember the thought that you were sharing when I stopped you because I had to go to break?
I I don't. I think I was making a link between what happened in Trinidad. I don't remember the specific. I know these things come to you as you're in motion, and sometimes you forget. I should have noted it. But the link I was making at the time was how we have these policies that are not in reality meant to serve us. So we are sold ideas that these things will be beneficial to us. We'll do this and it will be beneficial to us, like a blue bond, or in the case of Trinidad, I don't remember the specific point, but the refinery was dismantled, and now we are buying oil and we are buying petroleum products from the US. When we were making petroleum products in Trinidad, even aviation fuel and so on. So we were reliant, and we had some degree of sovereignty in our economy. Now we have dismantled, we have shut down the refinery and trying to sell it to somebody. Right? Oh, the point I was going to make about the environment and then related to Belly's point George was making was that when the refinery in Trinidad, even though it may have been functioning at a loss, the social and cultural benefits were tremendous, right? In fact, you cannot, even economics and business, everything cannot make a profit. In fact, in the retail sector, there's a term we use called loss leaders, in which you will put, so if I was selling books, for example, and I had books, I may bring in a water bottle and I will sell the water bottle at a loss because I wanted the people who would buy water bottles to come into my store. Because when they come to buy the water bottle, they will see the books I'm selling. And therefore, they will buy the book. So the water bottle would be a loss leader. It would not be the thing I wanted to make money. That's a concept in retail. That's why you go in a store and you see something at 40% off, 30% off. It's used as a loss leader because your real product is what you want them to come into the store to see. It's an advertising. So the refinery in Trinidad had, the refinery may have employed about 5,000 people directly in terms of the work. But in terms of the downstream sector, it may have employed about 15 to 20,000 people. You had retailers, you had people who cleaning clothes, people selling food, right? So when you look at this purely from a financial point of view, as well, okay, it only made 5% this year, right? The 5% may not be what you expect, but the accrued benefit down the line, the downstream sector, right, benefited the entire community economically and culturally, right? So you had sporting facilities, and if people have money, they'll go to these things. So it's the same thing with the ocean. How do we create an economy of the ocean that is not an apartheid economy telling people they can't do this, that benefits not just the NGOs and the state, but the fisher folk and everyone else? And these are the models we have to look at in terms of propagating development. That was the point I was trying to make.
Thanks, Brother Akka. Fair enough. Brother George, these Trojan horses, NGO, cooperatives, associations that claim to be representing the interests of, well, some of them claim to represent the interests of fisher folks. Others don't. They say they represent the environment and they're not people they represent. Give me your 2 cents on this, Brother George.
Well, I think it was a point well made, the issue of the Trojan horse. Let me go back to, I think it's a Greek mythology, and my recollection of it was that I believe either the Greeks or the Trojans was surrounded in this walled city, and to get to them, they were a superstitious bunch, and the Trojans, and Brother Akko, you'll have to help me out here. Yeah. But the gist of it was the Trojans kind of formulated this horse and they loaded it up with soldiers. And so the Greeks welcomed this horse and they pulled it into the walled city. And that was the end of it. And I see the parallels with the NGOs because the NGOs are thought of as a force for good. And you have to look at it because a part of what they do is obviously perhaps commendable in principle. Saving the environment, quote unquote, is not necessarily a bad thing, but you have to look at the details. The devil is in the details. And you have to realize that a fair amount of what the NGO does, they are highly financed and they are highly educated. It's an educated bunch of people. And so what you have in the NGO community are a number of people with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees and PhDs. And these are both local/national resident NGOs, as well as what was referred to as the LNGOs, which are the international NGOs. And the international NGOs have a huge footprint in Belize. So what has happened over time is that they have gone out and they have raised a significant amount of money using the cause and the name of fishers. And this whole blue band that has this marine component, a part of the selling point was that they would assist conservation to the extent that there wouldn't be stock depletion. They did not mention fishers, but it's inferential that people would assume and presume that fishers would benefit, except that they have not. And so I think that you have to look at the old adage of saying, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. There has to be an annex to that to say, except when you believe it does not serve your interest. And so I believe that the Blue Blonde gift horse should have been examined thoroughly to make sure that, as Brother Akka said, that you want a holistic benefit. You don't want a scenario and a situation where only a select group of people would be benefiting substantially at the expense, in this case in Belize, at the expense of the majority of those people whose livelihood is being injured and who are actually being set upon. You see, so I believe that the conversation about the Blue Band is like good poetry. It's never finished. It's never finished. And what needs to happen is that we need to carefully examine the impact that the Blue Band is having on the quality of life of fishers and the quality of life of the public in general. And I would say that there's quite a bit to go. I believe that the issue raised by Baraka of cooperative as being a model that could be, and I say could be, a part of the salvation for fishers is a point well made, except that cooperatives are only as good as the management behind them. And the cooperatives in Belize, they started out good in terms of being institutions where the stakeholders in the cooperatives, the people who own the shares in the cooperatives are not corporations, they are actually the fishers in this case. But their situation has been massively mismanaged. And so when I spoke about poverty, I was talking about the poverty of fishers themselves. The two cooperatives that are left, they are highly indebted. They are highly indebted. One of them has been on the verge of foreclosure, but somehow it has gotten a second gasp. Long story short, we have to understand that when we help our fishers and when we put in place those circumstances that would strengthen the cooperatives, that is when we will be in a situation where we'll be able to help fishers in a way that is substantial and in a way that will get them out of poverty. Recall that I said earlier that the the NGO community, when you look at the funds that will be at their disposal and that has been at their disposal, it is $180 million over the life of the program, which I believe is 19 years. That is not a little bit of money. I must say that a part of what I did in my work at the fisheries department has been fish farming. And I will tell you that one of the areas that would make ecological and environmental sense, one of the areas that could get our fishers out of the poverty trap they're in, is actually aquaculture. But that has not been flagged as a part of the response. It has not been flagged as a part of the remedy. What is happening with the conservation fund and that $180 million going forward is it's all tied up in consultancies, and it's all tied up in research, and it's all tied up in quote unquote capacity building. Let us teach fishers how to fish. These guys know how to fish. So,
okay, it's 11:53, so I have to start to wind up for give final thoughts.
you want to start with me or you were going to Baraka?
I'll start with you, Brother George.
Well, this has been more than a pleasure. It has been an excellent conversation, obviously with yourself, Sister YaYa. On a scale of 1 to 10, I give you an 11.
Listen to all the
of course, listen,
Baraka.
Well, listen, I will give Baraka like superstardom because he doesn't only speak in language that is digestible to everybody, but he's a wealth of knowledge and you could see a wealth of experience. And I think that this show has been a good complement of somebody with a fisheries background and somebody with a holistic worldview of development. And so I feel that it has been a privilege for me, Sister YaYa, to be invited again. And it has been a double privilege to have had somebody with the distinguished credential of Baraka. I want to say to Belize that the way out of poverty is through information. And I want to flag you again, Sister YaYa, to say you have been doing an excellent job. And it has been more than a pleasure meeting you at least on this forum, Baraka. And I wish the best for all of us going forward. God bless Belize.
Thanks, Brother George. Final thoughts, Brother Akko?
Thank you. Well, I just want to, Brother George, ask for some clarity on the Trojan horse. So you would have heard of the term beware of Greeks bearing gifts. That came from the myth of the Trojan horse. And what the Trojan horse was, it was a gift that the Greeks gave to the Trojans. And the Trojan, when they got this big gift of this horse, they were like, oh my God, they love us, and they were dancing and celebrating and having a good time. But in the horse were Greek soldiers. And while they were dancing and partying and having a good time, the Greek soldiers came out of the horse and burned Troy down. That's the gift of the Trojan. That's the story of the Trojan horse, right? So beware of Greeks bearing gifts. We could put that as NGO, blue bonds, or whatever name we want to call it. But beware of those who come to us telling us they want to help us, okay? Now, the last point I want to make is about the cooperative movement. The cooperative movement have been sabotaged by forces known and unknown. Some with the collaboration of the state and not so much. Because it is a model, in order for you to supplant something that has been in the ground for a long time, you have to destroy it and then replace it with something that you have to bring the expertise. You know, I remember having a discussion with an American diplomat, and I was critical of Habitat for Humanity, which is a place that builds in little houses, right? And I was telling the person, the reason I'm critical is not that we didn't want the help. The reason I was critical is that we had something in Trinidad called GAIAP, or Lend Hand, in which people would pool their resources to build homes. So You will buy the material, but the neighbors will pull the labor and all of that and help you, and whole communities were built like that. What they did was to decimate that a particular kind of ideology. And when that died, they brought in a concept. So now you have to depend on them to do something. And that is what is happening throughout the Caribbean. All our indigenous systems of sustainability, all our indigenous systems of economics, of living with each other, that is now being supplanted. And now we are being taught how to live and how to behave. And the NGO model is that model. The last one I want to make on that is the story of the coconut oil. I grew up in a rural village. I used to laugh. We used to cook with coconut oil, put it in your hair, rub it on your foot, you're shining when you go to school, right? I remember there was information in the newspaper that suggested that coconut oil was not good for us because it had high cholesterol. And so we neglected our coconut industry and started to buy corn oil and canola oil and so on. Only later to find out when some other scientists did research, found out in the Philippines and in India that coconut oil, in fact, actually has something that reduces cholesterol and that it was not bad for you. That study was called the battle of the northern oils versus the southern oils. Europe and the US wanted to sell us their canola and corn oil, so they created bogus science and convinced us through their health systems and their pamphlets and their brochures and so on. It's the same thing with breastfeeding. They convinced us that lactogel and all this milk and tell women not to breastfeed. So all these systems we use to sustain our lives, they convince us through cultural penetration that these systems were not good for us and that their systems were better. And in the end, when we destroyed what we had, they supplanted it with something else. And later on, we are finding out that these systems were very good for us. That is the story to me in Belize. We have to understand our own systems, right? Right? Our own way of doing things. Some of it is not relevant because everything is, you have something called irrelevant traditionalism. Some of it is not, all human systems go through that. We take what is good from what we have, reject the bad, but evolve it in the concept of modernization. That is what is going to save us. That is what is going to sustain us. And those are my closing remarks.
Big thanks, Brother Akko, Mutota, our co-host from the Twin Islands of Trinidad and Tobago. We had Brother George. I really, as always, I enjoy the conversation, especially when it's an organic conversation and I learn things I never knew before. And to again note that this is one part of the United Black Association for Development Educational Foundation UEF and Belize Federation of Fishers BFF, Belize Bluebond Awareness Campaign 2025. So big thanks, brothers. I have before we go, from 4 to 6 Belize time. In the Caribbean in Solidarity with Haiti webinar will be aired here on our local XTV channel. You can see it on XTV Belize YouTube, XTV Belize Facebook. Our MCO Christy will show the flyer. We encourage people to tune in so that you can become aware of what actually happened on the ground in Haiti. We've been doing this since December. Brother Akko has been instrumental in ensuring that people within the Caribbean from the ground up in solidarity with Haiti. Today's conversation will be militarism in the Caribbean. Brother Akko, do you quickly want to give a 2 cents on the militarism in the Caribbean webinar at 4 Belize time today?
Yeah, there is a very dangerous intervention in the Caribbean. Just recently, 2 countries, Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, signed what is called Status of Forces Agreement with the US, which will allow the US government to bring their military into our country. Wherever the US military goes, it is never a good thing for the people there. We have had that experience in Trinidad after the First World War, and we know what that is. So the idea is to educate people about this. And the sad thing about it, with support I want to make that George made, there was no transparency. There was no discussion with the people as to what this agreement involved. It was just signed by the government. And then whatever the consequences are, we will have to live with them. So we want to have this seminar, this webinar to explain to people what this militarism is, and also to explain to people the disinformation process that is taking place with Haiti and the rest of the country. There's a lot of disinformation with Haiti to confuse people about the realities of Haiti. So that would be the basis of the discussion this evening. And we have Jeb Sprague, who wrote a book called Militarism and its impact on democracy in Haiti. And impact is not the word, but he studied the whole Haitian situation. We have Maud Jean-Michel, a Haitian activist. We have Corey Gilks, who's a former member of the security services in Trinidad, who will speak about his experience and so on from being on inside of it. And then we have a young Namibian African-American scholar. His father was the former foreign minister of Namibia, but he's an activist scholar, and he will be giving us a perspective of this thing from that perspective. Okay, so that would be the webinar this evening.
Thanks, Brother Akko, for all the organizing you've been doing to ensure that from the bottom up, people within the Caribbean become knowledgeable from credible sources, and so it puts me in a better position for being solidarity with Haitian African sisters and brothers who continue to live under occupation, led by primarily the United States, the United Nations, and the other core countries like Brazil, Canada, France, and the rest of them. Our security guard today was Delroy Buckner. At XTV Studio, we have Krista Flowers. At Creme Radio, we have Larry G. This show will repeat at 5:30 this evening. How you repeat 5:30 and we go now on the end from 4 to 6. So you probably won't come on like 6 instead of 5:30 because our webinar is from 4 to 6. And then at 6 o'clock, Sunday Review will come on. I want to thank everybody who stay tuned. We give you love, vibration, support any zinc fence product and service. Again, Belize Federation of Fishers, big thanks for the solidarity on this campaign. Brothers, take care of yourself. Have the good rest of the day. Brother Akko, I want to say in a few hours from the In Solidarity with IT webinar. Only the people want to save the people.
Only the people say it. Thank you to say YaYa. Thank you, brother. George,
One love.
it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, okay.
Peace out.
All right.
Believe me, come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland.